Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I've had a request by somebody to go over the effects of tryptophan and its ability to get into the brain and dietary strategies to increase tryptophan transport into the brain. Now, you can take supplements of tryptophan, you can take 5-hydroxytryptophan, and both of these supplements are available on the market now. You can take them and they do seem to increase brain levels of serotonin. 5-hydroxytryptophan and tryptophan both pass into the brain. They're converted through a series of enzymes into serotonin, and as you're probably aware, serotonin has a very important function on human mood. The relationship between brain serotonin levels and mood is not fully understood, but there is evidence that low levels of serotonin can change personality. It can increase anxiety, for example. It can decrease the ability to sleep effectively, and some evidence also shows that low serotonin levels can increase aggression in human subjects. So the connection between optimal levels of serotonin and mood, it's not fully understood, but it does appear that low levels of serotonin appear to be detrimental. That's not saying that boosting serotonin levels above what they are normally would be good, but we can, through diet and through manipulation of a diet, we can optimize levels of serotonin in the brain. This has been shown. Now, many people don't want to take supplements, and that's fine. In fact, dietary supplements have been shown to be not quite as effective as increasing brain serotonin levels as manipulation of the diet anyway, in my opinion. It's possible to deplete a human subject, of plasma levels of tryptophan, but it's actually quite difficult to boost plasma levels of tryptophan by taking tryptophan supplements. What tends to happen if you take an amino acid drink, and this is what researchers tend to do to deplete tryptophan in the blood, they will give an amino acid drink which will contain all of the amino acids normally in the diet, but they will have either very low or it will either be very low or absent in tryptophan. That is able, when that is drunk by healthy subjects, to lower tryptophan levels within the blood, and as a result it is thought that that would then lower brain levels of serotonin, which would then change the mood. And there was a study I looked at recently where they did this exact experiment. They gave this tryptophan deficient amino acid drink to a group of subjects. Their plasma levels of tryptophan went down, and that increased their aggressiveness as measured in a computer simulation. What didn't happen is when they provided extra tryptophan within the drink to another group of subjects, they did see a slight increase in tryptophan levels in the blood, but it didn't translate into a decrease in aggressiveness compared to the control, suggesting that none of that tryptophan was getting into the brain, and it wasn't really having any effect on mood. In other words, the control situation, the normal levels of tryptophan in those subjects were optimal, and adding more tryptophan to the plasma didn't actually have much of an effect. Now, there's a number of reasons why this might be important. Firstly, the tryptophan has to get into the brain. Boosting plasma levels of tryptophan by taking a supplement doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to increase the transport of the tryptophan into the brain. Tryptophan is transported into the brain on the large neutral amino acid transporter, and there are other amino acids in the plasma that will compete with the tryptophan to get into the brain. For example, tyrosine will also use that transporter, the branched chain amino acids will also use that transporter, and various amino acids will all compete for that same transporter. So what we really want to do is to try and remove those amino acids from the plasma, or lower their levels in comparison to the amount of tryptophan that's in the plasma. When the ratio of tryptophan to other amino acids that use that transporter goes up, what we find is that the tryptophan transport into the brain also goes up, and the best way to do that is to consume carbohydrates. Carbohydrates will release insulin, and insulin is very good at pushing branched chain amino acids into skeletal muscle. And when you push the branched chain amino acids into the skeletal muscle, the plasma levels will transiently drop, and that increases the relative amount of tryptophan in the plasma. So the actual amount of tryptophan hasn't gone up, but it's gone up in comparison to the branched chain amino acids, which will compete for its transport into the brain. So lowering those branched chain amino acids increases the relative amount of tryptophan in the blood, and that increases the transport of tryptophan into the brain, and this then increases serotonin synthesis. And this is the dietary manipulation of serotonin levels, and this is one of the reasons that carbohydrate foods make you tired. It's one of the reasons that carbohydrate foods are very good at preventing anxiety and are thought of to be comfort foods, and this is because they allow the release of insulin, which then pushes more of the tryptophan into the brain, and this has a serotonin boosting effects. So those people that don't want to take supplements, those people who don't want to take the amino acid tryptophan, and they don't want to take 5-hydroxytryptophan, maybe because they don't like taking supplements, or maybe because they've had reactions to them in the past, if you take carbohydrate foods before you go to bed and you cause a release of insulin, you will actually boost your brain levels of serotonin. That serotonin will have the normal serotonin effects. In other words, it will affect your mood, but it will also provide a substrate to produce melatonin, which should help you sleep. Now, what are the best foods to produce this effect? Well, really, they're the carbohydrate foods that will cause the most release of insulin. Generally, fructose. Fructose doesn't cause insulin release. It's a sugar that's in, for example, lots of fruits, and it doesn't cause a release of insulin. The sugar that you really want to look for is glucose, and glucose is present in many fruits, and it's also present in starch. Now, my normal recommendation would be to consume whole grain foods. Whole grain foods containing lots of fibre. That's the normal healthy type of grain that you should be consuming as part of your diet. But those types of foods are not very good at rapidly releasing insulin. The types of foods that cause a rapid release of insulin are those that are digested most quickly, and those tend to be the refined foods or the sugars, glucose in its sugar form. So what you need really is a refined form of glucose that is available in a relatively easy to drink or relatively easy to consume form. And something like grapes or grape juice would be ideal. Grapes tend to be high in glucose, and they obviously, grape juice has had the fibre removed. So a glass of grape juice before you go to bed, a handful of grapes. Other fruits that contain high amounts of glucose, perhaps a banana would be beneficial. Anything that's got generally slightly refined. You might find that bowls of cereal, although the milk will slow the digestion of the carbohydrates, a bowl of ready-to-eat breakfast cereal may also have the desired effect. Now, the problem with these recommendations is that this tends to be different from everybody. Everybody deals with carbohydrate foods differently, and I think the best thing to do is to experiment with the foods that actually work for you. Just because I recommend grapes and you eat grapes, it doesn't have that effect. It might be that your body is not causing enough release of an insulin to have this effect on tryptophan in the plasma. The amount of carbohydrate you eat as well will be dependent on the person. Some people are very insulin sensitive, and therefore they can eat quite high amounts of, for example, grapes, or drink grape juice, and they have a very mild release of insulin. Others can eat the same amount and have a much larger amount of insulin release. So again, this is down to personal biochemistry, and this is why you need to experiment. So I would select some foods that you think are appropriate and change the amounts that you consume, and perhaps change the foods as well. But just think you need some kind of slightly refined glucose source, whether that be a ready-to-eat breakfast cereal, maybe some grapes, grape juice, something along those lines. The types of foods that you would consume if you were taking creatine, because creatine also requires an insulin spike and also to be able to get into the skeletal muscle cells. So those types of foods are what you should be looking for, and that should increase the relative amount of tryptophan in the plasma, and that in turn should boost your serotonin levels. So I hope that was helpful. That's a natural way of boosting your serotonin levels. And of course, the more carbohydrates you eat in your diet, generally the higher your serotonin levels will be, because you'll have this effect throughout the day. If you're constantly eating carbohydrate meals throughout the day, you tend to have this insulin effect on tryptophan throughout the day, and that tends to increase your serotonin levels. So if you find that you may have low serotonin levels, maybe you feel anxious, maybe you feel you're overly aggressive, or there's some other symptom that you think could be related to low serotonin levels, try increasing the carbohydrate content of your diet, and that might also have a beneficial effect. If you've got any comments on this video, please leave them in the comments box below, and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible, and I will see you next week for another video. Take care.